Hi, my name's Hudson, and I'm a geoholic.
Oh man, another great song from one of my favorite musical artists, KOLARS. Not Alone is the name of that. I'm just going to say it because I can't wait any longer, and I'm honestly a little giddy about this, but we have the one and only Rob Kolar with us this evening for episode 111, and I'm so excited about this conversation we're about to embark on, but you have no idea. I mean, I'm like a giddy little schoolgirl about this. You know, I'm a little starstruck. But before we get to that, we also have a guest co-host this week while Big Shoots is off spending Huddy's college fund at Legoland. Mr. Connor O'Gorman, fellow podcaster and all-around great guy, is in the co-pilot seat. Welcome, Connor.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me.
Yes, we're excited. We're excited. Some fresh meat, as they say.
Yep. Oh boy.
Yeah. So, we're super excited to have you here as well. Connor's first order of business is this week's Safety Apparel Safety Share. Connor, what you got, buddy?
Yeah, every year, millions of Americans use opioids to manage pain. Doctors prescribed opioids are appropriate in some cases, but they just mask the pain. And reliance on opioids has led to the worst drug crisis in American history. In 2019, healthcare providers across the U.S. wrote more than 215 million prescriptions for opioid pain medication, a rate of 66.5%. Per 66.5 prescriptions per 100 people. As many as 1 in 5 people receive prescription opioids long-term for non-cancer pain in primary care settings. More than 11 million people abused prescription opioids in 2019. Every day, more than 1,000 people are treated in emergency departments for misusing prescription opioids. Opioids were involved in 49,860 overdose deaths in 2019. That's 70.6% of all drug overdose deaths. Drug overdoses claimed the lives of nearly 64,000 Americans in 2019. Nearly 2/3 of these deaths, 66%, involve a prescription or illicit opioid. If you know someone in pain, encourage them to talk to their physician or PT about safe ways to manage pain. And I can tell you that from experience, people my age, I feel like there is a lot more from an opioid standpoint.
Yeah, got a crisis going on. Nice and dark to start off the episode.
Yeah. Oh, we're just getting rolling.
Yeah.
A lot of important stuff, though. Important stuff. Talk about.
Man, I mean, that's no joke. Seriously. Thanks for sharing that. Here we are in the Diamondback Land Surveying Studio. Good to be here. Last show of the year, boys.
That's huge.
It's crazy,
what a great year.
Right? Yeah. And of course, Trent Keenan and Diamondback Land Surveying signed up to sponsor the studio next year. So we're super excited about that and appreciative. Shout out to this week's featured friend of the program. Do you want me to take this, Connor, or you got it?
I'll take it. All
right. Who do we got for this week's friend of the program?
Yeah, it's Mentoring Mondays. Do you ever wish that you could have a weekly cup of coffee with a like-minded surveying professional?
Yes.
We are here to tell you that you can do just that, Kent, by participating in the virtual Mentoring Mondays for Land Surveyors program. This is a weekly Zoom meeting featuring live Q&As on your favorite surveying topics. Every Monday, the forum is hosted by a rotating series of guest speakers who are among the best in the surveying business. Think of Mentoring Mondays as the weekly office hours for surveying professionals. So whether you are a freshman in college or a 50-year professional land surveyor looking to contribute your wisdom and experience, Mentoring Mondays is for you. To find out, simply visit www.mentoringmondays.xyz.
So I love this. I got like two of the smartest young brains that I know in the same room as me, but both of them struggle to read.
Can't read under the pressure.
What is the deal?
We can't do it.
What's the problem?
Why is that? Why can't people read anymore?
Our brains are focusing on a million other things.
Yeah, like
we could be reading
crypto, NFT.
Yeah, exactly. Reading that, I was just thinking about my NFTs.
I knew you were. We're going to get into that here in just a bit. All right, time for the Trimble Geospatial Weekly Words of Wisdom. This is a fantastic quote for all of us to take with us into 2022, let's say. Okay, here we go. Conquer anger with non-anger. Conquer badness with goodness. Conquer meanness with generosity. Conquer dishonesty with truth. Who do you think that is?
Is that Rob?
No, could be.
Gandhi.
You're close, dude. It's Buddha.
Oh, same thing.
Love it.
Oh, it's a great quote. All right, real quick, let's catch up with the boys just a little bit. PJ, what's up, man?
Not a bunch. Yeah, like you said, this is the last show of the year, so a great number year for us. A lot of good content this year. We're ending off the year with 61.7 thousand downloads total, so another big year for us.
Fantastic.
Exponential growth per usual. So excited for the next year. See what we can come up with.
100,000.
Oh, that's easy. 100,000 easily. So yeah, I'm excited to see who we'll have on the show this next year. What kind of new stories we can tell, perspectives we can share, and what passions we can bring to the table. So
yeah,
looking forward to it.
Friends we can make.
Yep. Connor, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I almost didn't come on here. I had a 5-team parlay, and your Bears almost pulled a bad one. I had them by 7, and at the very end of it, they almost didn't cover the 7. So luckily,
you hit the 5-teamer.
I hit the 5-teamer. I was so lucky.
Nice.
Now, don't let me,
it was a $10 bet.
Oh, the $13 bet, but still
13 to win what? 100?
310.
310. That's nothing. That's nothing.
But I've been losing a lot of money recently. So
you can buy one of Jake's NFTs.
Monkeys. Yeah.
Monkeys.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Right. They're trading way higher than that.
Are they?
Yeah.
You think
great market.
Safer, NFTs or sports betting? That's
both terrible.
Okay.
Both terrible. Both just as much gambling.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, but I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
That's good. Good. You know what? I had the Bears in a 4-team parlay and went the opposite. I took and they freaking win the game, for God's sakes. I mean, you're not going to win that game, and of course they win the game. So I lost my 14 parlay. Other than that, are you done, Connor? Is there anything else you'd like to get out there?
No, I'm just happy to be on here. I mean, it's awesome to be a part of a growing podcast. So I'm excited.
Well, you're all of a sudden you're going to get a taste of stardom tonight.
Yeah. Did you like that little marketing plug, by the way? The recruiter that does land surveying, recruits for certified land surveyors. I said, hey, if you're going to take a call with Kent, why don't you check out his Geoholic podcast and send him the website.
It was awesome, man. I appreciate that.
Shameless.
Yeah, shameless plug. Don't get used to it. All right. For me, great Christmas. Pretty much stayed in that like alcohol-induced Zen state of mind for like 48 hours. It was pretty good. Ate like a king. What else did I do? I did my best to spread as much joy to as many people as possible.
That's what we're here for.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Add value and make friends.
Yes, exactly. So it was an overall success for sure. Other than that, our Cardinals freaking suck. They're horrible.
Wheels came off.
It's an Arizona sports team. What do you expect?
Yes, exactly. All right. We got a lot to get to tonight. I'm super excited for this conversation, as I mentioned earlier. So, that commercial, the guy, the most interesting man in the world, that guy?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right? I kind of put our guest this evening in that same category. So we've got with us
too much pressure.
You got a lot to live up to. Our guest this evening is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Rob Kolar. A little bit about Rob here to get you up to speed. He was born in LA, grew up in England as a kid, and get this, he actually attended a Hogwarts-like boarding school.
That's hilarious.
We'll have to circle back on that in just a minute. Rob had an erratic childhood, he said, lots of moving, never lived in the same house for more than a couple years. He lived for short periods in Malaysia, Hong Kong, New York, and Montreal as his dad was working on location for films. Rob's interests include writing and producing music, of course, crypto investing, tarot cards, plant medicine, and psychedelic exploration. We got so much to talk about. A lot to unwrap here tonight. I'm so excited. He's wrote and produced records, toured and performed around the world, and played major festivals like Bonnaroo. This allowed him to connect with thousands of fans and audiences from all walks of life and ages, developing a global fan base, get this, with no label or manager. And he's even won a John Lennon Songwriting Award. Rob, thank you so much for joining the Geoholics tonight.
Thanks for having me. Wow. Best intro I've ever had. We should just go now. That's it. You've done all of it.
No, man.
Thanks for having me.
Huge fan of both your music and your mind. I feel like I know you. I have friends on Facebook, follow you on Instagram. And if you guys aren't following Rob on Instagram. You absolutely need to. There's so much good content there. We have one quick icebreaker question for you before we get into this. You ready for this?
Yeah, well, we'll see.
All right. So it's pretty simple. If you had to eat one of these 3 sandwiches for the rest of your life and nothing else, what would it be? Grilled cheese, sloppy Joe, or peanut butter and jelly?
Grilled cheese, definitely.
All right. I love it. There's a lot you can do with grilled cheese. You can have ham. You can have
Make an inside out.
Different kinds of cheese, different kinds of bread. Do you like do it with butter, olive oil? What do you can mix and match, you know? Oh
Yep.
yeah. Grilled cheese.
Totally agree with that. I'm on board. Connor, since you haven't answered this question before, what do you got?
I would do grilled cheese. I think
Grilled cheese as well?
PG exactly on the head on that one.
Yeah,
Just that,
absolutely.
it's just-
The only thing, what about the tomato soup? You got to have the tomato soup to dip it.
Ooh, is that included though? Is that part of the equation or no?
Not, so it makes it like 50% is good at that point.
I've answered as peanut butter and jelly for years, but with Rob's argument, I've got to take grilled cheese for tonight. I've switched over.
I did think peanut butter jelly was a close second. What about you, Kent?
I'm a sloppy Joe.
Oh,
Sloppy Joe.
throwing a wrench in this thing.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that at all.
Maybe coming from the Midwest. I mean, sloppy Joes, I mean, everywhere you went had a sloppy. You can't even find a sloppy Joe in Arizona.
No. I talked to someone actually last week about a sloppy Joe. They didn't know what it was.
They're missing.
Right. Some parts of the country, it almost doesn't really exist. Like you don't really find them in LA either. Yeah. Arizona. Yeah.
Their response actually was,
certain places.
their response actually was, is that a deconstructed hamburger?
Kinda, only
Yeah, I was
better.
There's like more like, well, I'm not sure.
Thank God for
Well, that's
manwich. Thank God for manwich.
Elementary schools serve it. I think that's about it here in Arizona.
That's about it, right?
Okay. Is a sloppy Joe better than a burger, or is a burger better than a sloppy Joe? I think we need input on this.
I would much rather have a sloppy Joe any day.
No, burger,
Yes.
burger.
What-
I want everything together.
What type of
Cleaner.
sloppy joes are you eating?
I'm feeling Jake on this one.
I could eat 6 sloppy.
Burger. You want like a juicy burger, right?
Yeah, Jake, he likes that.
Oh, Ken is now claimed the sloppy Joe king. That's his new nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? I will sit here and eat 12 sloppy Joes in the next episode if I have.
You should.
On air. That is a bet. I want to see it.
Do you do pickles on your sloppy joes then, or onions, or like what do you do?
Pickles.
Do you just do sloppy, just the meat and the?
You
and the
obviously
bun?
haven't had a good sloppy Joe. I'm going to invite you over for dinner sometime. And we'll hook you up.
Just
Yeah.
a sloppy Joe with a little extra sloppy.
You know what? A side of tater tots helps the situation.
I could go with that. That sounds good. I'm into that.
All right, Rob, let's talk about you a little bit.
All right. Well, I think sloppy Joe's more fun than talking about me, but
Tell us about
it's your show.
tell us about the Hogwarts grade school you went to.
Well, it's very much like Hogwarts. We wore uniforms and socks up to our knees. Yeah, it was when I read the Harry Potter books, it was like this weird flashback to my childhood where it looked a little bit like Hogwarts. There were the grounds. It was all of the kind of English stereotypes of boarding school where uniforms, houses, just take out like Dumbledore and the magic and the giants and all like the crazy magic shit. Am I allowed to swear on this show? I don't know.
We promote it.
Encourage.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, it was a lot like Hogwarts.
So crazy. And your dad, so you did a lot of traveling around because of your dad's involvement in the entertainment industry. Talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, he was a wild Czech man that a lot of people described as kind of like an Eastern European mafiosa type, kind of like slick back hair and wore the suits, but he was in the film business and moved to LA to get into film. And as he worked his way up, he was working on all these different projects and shoots. And so sometimes they would be on location, right? So it's like, what does the family do? Well, they're coming with us. So we'd go to Malaysia or Montreal or New York, or my sister was going to school in Hong Kong for a while for like, anywhere between a few months to 6 months. And we would just kind of live there, set up shop, be kind of involved, hanging out as kids, and then on to the next, or we're back to LA or this kind of thing. So it's very kind of chaotic, kind of wild, interesting, but also like got to make friends quick, got to, get used to this pace of just moving around, shifting around, and things changing all the time.
Sure. What a dynamic childhood, though.
Yeah. What was the coolest place you lived?
Sorry?
What was the coolest place you lived?
I mean, I have real fond memories of Malaysia, because then we would have time where we would like go and go to like orangutan parks and like meet animals and experience that kind of thing. Hong Kong was super weird. I remember flying in, and it's like, I don't know if you guys ever been there, but it's like almost like New York City on an island. So the plane's landing and you just see these huge skyscrapers on an island, and it's this very bizarre contrast of like an island and a giant city, metropolis kind of thing. So every place has its perk or its interesting element, but those two kind of stand out.
Super cool. So one more question about your, I guess your childhood that I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because your grandfather played a role in a movie that gave me nightmares for a month of my life when I talk to us a little bit about that.
I feel like as his grandson, who's also named after him, I need to constantly apologize to people for this, because this is like a common thing. It's like, thanks to your granddad or the movie, I don't go in the ocean, or I can't swim, or all these things. So yeah, he was in Jaws. He played Quint, which is the fisherman who got eaten, kind of the shark hunter of the film, the raggedy alcoholic shark hunter. And yeah, that's my granddad. And he so I also like to tell people that like my granddad was eaten by a shark, died, and I don't mention the part about the movie, but yeah, fun, interesting guy, legend in the family. Lots of stories about him. He was big drinker, kind of a wild man. On the set of Jaws, he gave Richard Dreyfuss a really hard time. To this day, Richard Dreyfuss talks about it with like a lot of trauma. My pushes buttons. Yeah,
That's awesome.
so
The part in the movie when he's sitting there at the table, and they're all freaking drunk out of their mind, and he's telling the story about I don't know, was it a Navy vessel or something that goes down, and all the
That's
sailors,
true story.
yeah, go into the end, they get eaten by a shark, and it's like, oh my god, I'm like 7 years old and I'm watching this, and like,
That's so funny, because that was
horrible.
the part that stuck in my mind too. That's when I really got freaked out. Mhm.
Yeah, so funny. Yeah, good stuff.
yeah, that scene, famously, he came up with and ad-libbed a lot of those lines. They kind of let them kind of free reign on that scene. So he was quite proud of like being able to kind of insert his own personality and dialogue into that one.
Yeah,
Little tidbit.
Super cool. I'm sure there's some great stories there. So let's kind of start off on a I don't know, an easy topic. Let's talk about music, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start there. And I'm very curious, what was like, moving all around. I'm sure that you had all these different influences as far as music goes. Talk about that. I mean, if you had a hometown, what was your hometown music scene like?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in the beginning, it was funny because I was in England, so I wanted to be in the choir, right? You want to sing in the choir, but I kept getting rejected. So it was like, no, you're not a good singer. You're not quite right for this kind of thing. Can't hold a note. But as a kind of a middle school, beginning of high school, I discovered punk rock. So it was like Rancid and the Clash and the Ramones and bands of that era, like earlier, late 70s, but also the kind of 90s resurgence of punk. And I realized, you don't have to actually be a good singer to rock in a band and to like lead a fucking band and express yourself. So it was really like punk music that allowed me to have the confidence to be like, oh, you can just do this. It's more about the attitude. It's more about the, persona, the expression, the lyrics, the feeling. So I credit a lot of that to punk music. At like, I think I was 13th birthday, got a ticket to the Palladium to see Rancid, and and L7 was opening, and it was like I jumped in the mosh pit. Huge guys with mohawks are like elbowing me in the face. And I'm just like, yeah, this is amazing. Like freaking out. This little kid in there with like, and then I had kind of the butt cut, like 90s hairdo, the long. And I immediately like cut it. I'm like, I'm going spike punk rock, and had Rancid posters, Clash posters on my wall and stuff like that. Got really into that whole scene. And as a result, we lived in this kind of small town outside of LA, like Montrose, kind of La Cañada area. There's not much going on, so we found a local community center and just brought our PA in there, and we just charged like the local weird kids that weren't invited to like the high school parties. They were like, we don't know what we're doing this weekend. We're like, come to our show. You can like dance and skank around, which is like the ska dance, because we had like ska bands playing too. So it's just like all the weirdo kids would come and pay like $3 or $5, come hang out in the community center, and our bands would play, and we would just set up these DIY shows, and it was all grassroots DIY stuff. So that was really the beginning of it all punk rock, DIY, grassroots. Like if it's not there, make it,
I love that. If it's not there, make it.
Right.
So you're gonna get a kick out of this. I'm a little bit older than you are, of course, but when I was in high school, I went through the whole punk rock phase as well. But
nice.
For me, it was like I can remember going to see a show in Chicago at I think it might have been the Aragon Ballroom, as a matter of fact, and it was the Dead Kennedys.
Nice.
Circle Jerks, Naked Ray Gun, and who was the other band? The Crucifix was the other band. Yeah, it was
all on the same bill.
Yes, it was absolutely.
That's awesome. Sometimes they would like cram like 8 bands on, like that was the punk rock show, right? Like 30-minute sets, 8 bands. Oh, that's awesome. And seeing Dead Kennedys at that time, like that's classic. That's awesome.
It was pretty amazing. I wish I would have seen the Sex Pistols. Huge Sex Pistols fan. But that wasn't meant to be for me.
Punk rock's coming back too.
Are you getting into it, bud?
Oh yeah. I got a buddy that's actually a drummer that they just all quit their jobs as their band's First and Forever. They just signed a record. Yeah. He's the drummer of it. He's one of my good friends, and they're punk rock. And people used to be like, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" Like quitting your job, doing the band thing. And they're going big.
That's awesome.
Nice.
With like a little Reliant K feel.
Right.
Right on.
But yeah,
it's possible. There's ways to make it work.
Like that Olivia.
It's like how do you have a career in music? Somehow it manages to happen. Yeah.
I texted him today. I'm like, hey, do you know Rob Kolar? And he's like, oh yeah, love him. Like he's an inspiration kind of thing. And so I'm like, oh, perfect. Like it's interesting. I'm like,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a younger generation now.
That's awesome.
So Rob, let's go this direction then. So we talked about like some of your influences, stuff like that, and all those bands you named, like the Clash and the Ramones and stuff. I could totally see that in your music. How has your music evolved over the years? Like, were you one type of musician when it was he's my brother, she's my sister, and that did some sort of evolution for KOLARS, or do you think you've kind of brought that the whole thing along the entire time?
Yeah, no, I think I was always aware so it was like it started with the punk, and then I had this like kind of alternative power pop band almost called Listen that evolved into a band called Color, which was almost like post-punk, like had even elements of hardcore. Like we kind of liked bands like Hot Snakes and At the Drive-In and stuff, and we fused that with almost mod music. So it was always these hybrids of different genres. And then that turned into Lemon Sun, which was a little bit more rock and roll and psychedelic and throwback 60s. And then He's My Brother had these folk elements and kind of 60s folk hints and also garage rock and like anti-folk and stuff. And then that evolved into KOLARS. So each band I feel like brings some of the influences and then explores something new. So it's this like weird hybrid Frankenstein music sound that keeps evolving and changing, and you like sew on another limb, or you like change the eye, or like, you know what I mean? Like just keep experimenting. So, and now I'm on to kind of what's the next frontier and what's the next chapter and all that. And I think it's exploring this new form of like taking the idea of a dance record, like almost like disco or dance music, but giving it this raw edge, and like almost what would Bob Dylan do if he was going to make a dance record, or what would like the Clash, I mean the Clash had dance songs, but like taking the attitude of like a little bit anti-establishment and social commentary, but infusing it with like this just infectious wanting to move and dance, and like almost like in that old kind of soul disco way, you know, trying to, and I'm exploring what that even means, but that's the beginning of the next phase, I think.
And again, I'm going to reiterate, if you're not following Rob on Instagram, you have to, because not only do you get to see some of what he's talking about, but once in a while he'll do like an acoustic thing in his bathroom, and it's some of the best. I mean, it's amazing. Every time I listen to one of those, I get the chills. He's so talented. It's ridiculous.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's nice to know that. Yeah, I'm like, maybe this would be a fun thing to explore. The reverb sounds good in here. There's a toilet just in case I'm feeling sick or need to go, and I'll just strap on the guitar and play, and it, you know, throw an iPhone up there and just hit record and share it, you know. And people seem to really identify with it and like it, especially like the kind of short snippet songs. I was thinking about maybe even doing some like off the cuffs, like where I'm writing it as I'm playing. I haven't done that yet, but that could be an interesting insight into like how a song's even created. So there's lots of things to explore with that, but thank you for watching and appreciating.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great segue into what I want to talk about next. And that is songwriting. How has that evolved for you? And I'm always curious when I talk to musicians, it's like, do you come up with like the music first and then the lyrics, or the lyrics, then the music? How does it typically work for you?
Yeah, that can vary, you know. I think if you're going through something powerful in your life, sometimes you'll write down certain lines or themes, right? And then that can fit into the right piece of music. More often than not, it's like a feeling, right? There's an emotion. So I'll pick up the guitar and a riff comes, or these chords come, and it captures what's going on either in the world that I'm observing or in my life. And it's and usually if it's going on in my life, it's a reflection of something that's happening in the kind of collective consciousness, right? So then it's about, oh, how do I want to capture this, express it? A melody kind of comes, and then the lyrics tend to come. Oh, this is the mood and feeling and emotion of the melody and the music. What words can capture that feeling? So if anything, it's the feeling and the core emotion that sort of comes first, and then all the other elements kind of form around that.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about what you said a second ago about how maybe, you know, you had the idea of maybe, you know, videoing you as you kind of write the song. And, you know, it'd be kind of cool. You can have like, you know, the people that are watching or have watched, like even like input with lyrics or something like that, and just like build a song virtually. That'd be pretty cool.
I love that idea. And we did that live. Actually, we had a show in Portland a couple years ago, and we had no songs left. And the crowd was like, one more. It was like we'd done an encore, and there was like calls for another song. We're like, what the, you know, like we're off stage, like what the fuck are we gonna do? We can't just like leave people, you know, you want to leave them wanting more, but you also don't want to leave them like, you know, out there in the crowd, like ready to go. So we jumped out and started creating a song on the spot, and incorporated the audience singing along, and it was all impromptu. And in other shows, we were in Germany, and we even had someone come up and just were like, sing whatever comes to you in this moment. So I do love that idea of having no boundary between the audience and the band, because what a beautiful thing to do is like create this combination. They're part of the creation, you know. It's like experiential art where you walk through the art or you peel something off of a painting. Why can't you do that with music, you know? So yeah, I feel I love that idea. I'll have to see how to infuse that in. But I've been asking fans actually, like, title, like what should I title this song, or which, but I think you can even take it a step further, like you said. It's a cool idea.
Do you think it's more challenging to perform or to write a song in your eyes?
Well, I think it depends who you ask as a musician. For me personally, I would say it's probably more challenging the performance. But like for Lauren, who is the drummer, my ex-wife, um, she was way more drawn to the performance, and the idea of her writing a song was really the challenging thing. So I think it depends on the musician and what their kind of forte is. But for me, performance is a little more daunting because you're kind of naked out there and you have to hold, especially because when you've played for several thousand people, it's like, how do we capture this energy and bring everyone into this same kind of space, this same frequency of experience, and it's you just have to go with it. It's almost like surrender is the word I would use. It's just like trust and surrender, and be the more authentic and real you can be with an audience, I think the more they appreciate it, because ultimately they want to experience that and be able to do that themselves, right? So I think that's
I love that.
the beauty of the live performance. And ideally, go on.
No, I'm sorry. The word surrender. I love that word. And I mean, this is at a completely different level, but even myself, I prior to starting this podcast like 2.5 years ago, I didn't consider myself like a super outgoing, talk in front of large groups type person. So like by doing this over the last 2.5 years, it's like brought that out of inside of me, and I didn't even know it was in there. And every time I'm like, right before we start, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to surrender and let's freaking go with this. Let's see what happens. But
exactly. Yeah. Was there a moment before you did the first one where you were just like, okay, like you're on the diving board or on the edge of the pool and you're like, this is the first, I'm going head first right now?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I feel that way almost every show. And to me, it's kind of exciting, at this point. I mean, I still get amped up before the show. I couldn't sleep last night thinking about tonight's show, honest to God. I was so excited about this conversation.
Love it.
And, it's like, oh gosh, what was I going to say? The authenticity, and like the humility that you show on stage, that's what draws people in. That's what draws you to a podcast. Look at Joe Rogan. That guy's one of the humblest guys on the planet, on his podcast anyways. And people love him because he's humble. He can make fun of himself. And
yes, that's key, is having that self-deprecation and humor. I love that about him. Also that the beauty about the Joe Rogan podcast too is that he doesn't ever judge the guest. He's got like this whole array of guests that some people are talking about conspiracies, some people are talking about like very kind of conformist mentality, all of the above, from drugs to everything, and he just listens and asks kind of the appropriate question based on the guest. And that, I think, is also what people love about him. What's so great about that show.
Yeah, he's put America in a podcast, basically. So, I mean, like Rob just said, it's like he brings diverse thought into it and doesn't judge people. And like, people that believe different things than him, are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And that when they're coming on, and then the way that he creates that conversation, I think is incredible. And it, to Rob's point, it's surrendering to, other people's ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Enough about Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Enough about Joe Rogan. Oh man, that's great.
It's a good show.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. He's my podcast idol, no doubt about it. All right,
we're in the right place then.
Couple generic questions here. What was the first concert you went to?
It was the one I mentioned, Palladium. I mean, there were probably some earlier ones, but the one I went to alone, no parents, nothing. Yeah, I think it was my 13th birthday. Palladium, punk rock show, Rancid, L7. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to Palladium this weekend.
What?
Yeah, hopefully I have the same kind of experience.
Really?
Nice.
What are you seeing?
This guy is called John Summit. It's like an electro dance house music guy.
Oh, cool.
Well, we're gonna talk about the current state of music here in just a minute. All right. Before we get to that, if you could play in any other band, who would it be?
I saw that question and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to answer. To be honest, this next phase, I want to collaborate with all my friends and favorite musicians that are kind of, some of them are a little bit known, but a lot of them are underground. And I think about my friend Max, who created this project, Black Hole Oscillators. And this year we're going to do a song together. And he's not very well known, but he just makes the coolest, most interesting music. It's this fusion of like kind of R&B soul with like he likes a lot of 80s new wave and kind of new romantic stuff and folk and so psychedelia. So he's blended it all together in this cool sound. So Black Hole Oscillators, there's a little shout out to my friend Max.
All right, we'll check
there. Yeah, very cool band.
Let's give a shout out to what was the other band you mentioned? The Hallelujah Chicken Run Band.
Oh yeah. I'd love to jam with them. I don't know who's alive in that band, but 70s like West African. I think actually they might be from they might be from Tanzania or Zimbabwe, but African kind of like that 70s African rock dance music. Really cool sound. Yeah, awesome.
I had never heard of them until you sent that in your email, so I had to check them out. Like, this is crazy. I like it. It's awesome.
That's awesome. What's your David Bowie song? I was going to ask you that because that is one of my favorite artists.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge Bowie fan. We did, and he's my brother, she's my sister. We would cover Moon Age Daydream, so I have a real fondness for that one. But so many songs. I love Velvet Goldmine, Changes as a classic. But what else? Oh, You Pretty Things. So many great Bowie songs. How about you, man?
Life on Mars. Life on Mars.
That whole album is amazing, but that song's fantastic. Yeah.
Another great segue there, Connor. This is fantastic. What do you think about the current state of today's music, Rob?
I want to hear what you guys say first, actually. I think you guys should answer that one. Because I'm always interested in like what not that I'm not a music listener, but what do audiences, what do you guys think? I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking here too, but I'll jump in at the end, but I want to hear what you guys think.
Fair enough. I will go first. I feel like somebody from my age, like I am completely in touch with such a wide array of music. I've always loved music ever since I was, I don't know, grade school, what have you. You know, I've gone to a shit ton of concerts and stuff like that, and always looking for not the next big thing per se, but the next big underground thing. You know, that's kind of how I kind of approach it. I love to support local music. Still, a huge classic rock fan, huge, classic alternative fan, I guess. But let's talk about current music. Who do I listen to current besides KOLARS?
You don't need to listen to anyone.
Have you heard of the band Mother?
I have heard of them actually. They've been talked about a bit. I don't know. I'm offhand. I can't kind of think of what they sound like, but I do. I am familiar with them as a band, as a name.
Those guys, well, and girl, I suppose. I like Air Traffic Controller. Have you heard of them? I like Airborne Toxic Vent. Still like those guys. They haven't put anything new in a while.
We opened, my band Lemon Sun opened for them in one of their residencies early when they first started. Yeah. We were like the opener band. Yeah. I remember those guys. They came out of the LA scene, like from this whole neighborhood where I'm at. Yeah.
Yep. They're awesome. Rainbow Kitten Surprise. You heard of them?
Heard the name, don't know the music. Good, fun, like colorful name.
Colorful band.
Paints a picture.
Check them out for sure. All right, that's some of my, I guess, current music preferences. How about you, Jake? Besides your DJing stuff?
I think it's like the electronic, like disco house, like dance stuff is like big now. It's getting like bigger and bigger. I think that like, especially like from like our local scene, like what we have here, like we see that a lot. I mean, obviously rap is always there too. I think that's probably what I listened to more when I was younger, but more now I like kind of what you were saying about that new age disco. I mean, Daft Punk was like the biggest ever. That's like what I've grown up on. So I listened to like just kind of that. I mean, Discovery was huge. I grew up on Discovery and Random Access Memory, and that was like kind of my disco growing up, with Depeche Mode or Yaz, things like that. Yes. So I'm big synth and just piano and kind of like that kind of electronic stuff.
Upstairs in Eric's.
One of the greatest.
Cool. One of the greatest. Records everywhere for sure. Connor. Tell us about you.
Well, it's a little different for me. I'm a lot of people say they listen to a lot of things, and I'm one of those individuals. So growing up, my dad has a master's in music, and so I had to sing in the choir all the way through when I graduated high school. Not good at it, but still had to sing in the choir. But like I listen to punk rock, like alternative rock. I'm a big 21 Pilots fan, but I like Frank Ocean's a good artist that I listen to, which is definitely not alternative rock at all.
Yeah.
I used to listen to a lot of rap, but when they got into the mumble phase of that all, I can't understand them is the issue. I'll listen to piano throughout the day, acoustic. So like Teddy Schwims, if you guys have heard of that artist, he's a new acoustic artist. He's really good. And then from an EDM perspective, I think that Jake talked about, and Rob was the one that first mentioned it on like the disco track. I think a lot of music's going towards that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so my favorite artist in that realm of EDM house music is Two Friends right now. So they're like big booty mixes.
Big booty mix.
Big booty
Volume
mix.
20 just came out.
Oh yeah. So I listen to a lot of that, or like RL Grimes. So when I was in college, I'd go up to Vegas often and go to like RL Grime concerts or DJ sets, I should say. But no, it's interesting, and I think festivals are taking off. I saw that Rob is performed at ACL, which is a big festival. So that's my music taste. I'm all across the board.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
I like it. It's a nice diversity with you guys. Like everyone kind of comes from a slightly different angle, and I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of all of that. Yeah, I mean, I love from alternative. I've been delving back into like a lot of African kind of like Hallelujah Chicken Run. So how can I incorporate very percussive elements? So you have like this EDM sound. So what I love is like part of the scene I've been in is like kind of this alternative, and at times you could call it new age or slightly burner scene of like the modern hippie, right? And a lot of the music in that culture is dance and EDM. But my feeling was always like, man, it would be great to create something that was a little bit more organic, or like less about like when you hear the drums on a lot of those, it's all very kind of computerized and samples. And so it's like, what if you took that approach but brought in all of this live percussion elements and used more organic sounds, but gave it that same impulse and rhythm and same kind of momentum. So delving into the African and also old soul music, from Otis Redding and all the Motown and 70s stuff and Al Green and all that. How can you take some of those sounds and compare it or sort of fuse it with disco and EDM and create this kind of like modern dance sound? So it's all an exploration, but I've been kind of feeling that run of things.
When I hear EDM, I think Eagles of Death Metal.
Oh, that's a band I've loved for a long time. Great band, great production, tight, like distorted drums, really cool. Yeah, I actually hung out with Jesse one night. We got wasted and danced in his living room. Jesse's the singer of Eagles of Death Metal. Hilarious dude. So warm, like. It was when we hung out, it was before they kind of took off as a band, but they were starting to get known. And he had like, you love when you hang out with musicians with it's like no pretentiousness. It was just like, we're getting wasted. We're dancing in my living room. There's like 5 of us and we're all just like grabbing each other's arms, swinging around, jumping off couches. And it was like, no weirdness, no pretension. Like he's just a fun guy. He's a real deal. He's just like a real rock and roll spirit. So yeah, to Jesse, love that guy.
Awesome.
So I asked this question around the office recently with some of the guys, and it's a go-to question for me now. What's your guilty pleasure like artist? Like that you might not want to talk about, but you listen to them. I'm kind of curious, Ken.
Oh, me?
No,
yeah.
Everybody.
Go around.
Wow.
What you got?
Oh my gosh. Guilty pleasure.
I can go first.
Go ahead.
It popped in my head. I think it's more acceptable now, but when we were little, everyone used to clown on him a lot. But I like the stuff that he's done recently and like kind of like who he's like grown up into is just Justin Bieber.
Dude, that's my guy. That's
Really?
literally my guilty pleasure. Like,
everyone you would get teased for liking him back in the day, but like I feel like nowadays, well, obviously we're older, so like that doesn't happen. But I really like his stuff, like his more recent stuff as he's gotten older.
I can't believe I didn't talk about it at first. Like that is the person that I probably listen to the most. Like that is just Jay Biebs. Oh hell yeah. If I had a fanboy, it'd be Jay Biebs.
Yeah.
Like and his song like Monster, it's incredible.
So
Peaches, how about Peaches?
Yeah.
That's pretty mainstream.
So you're you're fanboy of who?
Jay Biebs.
Jay Biebs.
Yeah, Justin Bieber. We're on first name basis, sometimes.
Sounds like it.
And I'm Rob Kolar.
Oh yeah. I knew that.
Hey, what's
Jay Beebs was hanging out. My sister lives in Ojai, California, and it got out very quick that Jay Beebs was like in town, and so we were like cruising around, and like my little niece and nephew, like they kind of know who he is, but and a friend I was with who's a girl who's a little younger was like looking out the window, seeing if she could like spot Jay Beebs hanging out, but we didn't see him unfortunately. But he was there. We were in the same town.
That's awesome. I think for me, now I think about it, Pink.
Okay.
I like Pink.
Sure. Good one.
Oh, I dig some Pink songs. I gotta say, actually, that's a good one. Yeah, she has some anthems, some like gnarly anthems where her voices can really hit those notes and like shred some notes.
Yep. She's pretty attractive as well. You can't go wrong with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get up if an ABBA song comes on.
I love that.
at a wedding or something, I kind of have a soft spot for ABBA, and I do like some Britney Spears songs, I have to admit.
Yep. She's finally
They're
got
just catchy,
Mhm.
But
Definitely. So I don't want to spend too much time on it because there's still a number of things.
right.
I know that your musical career, you pretty much independent. You're not really a label, right? You've been self-promoted.
Yeah.
What is that? I'm trying to figure out, like on Spotify with downloads and this and that. I mean, how hard is it to make money in the music industry?
It's a wide scope, but it's a challenge, but then again, I've been able to do it. So if I can say that I've done it, then it's, anyone else can, but it is hard to navigate. Like, I feel why I can have a career as a musician and not be sort of signed to some big deal or something like that is wearing a number of different hats. So like, I'm currently mixing someone's record, so I can do that for someone else, facilitate that. I scored a TV show for 4 years. I toured a bunch. Our records get licensed for films and TV shows, some pretty prominent ones, and you tend to get some back end on that. But it's like, you never know when any of these things are going to come, unless you plan a tour, you can kind of schedule that. But otherwise, it's like a juggling act. So any month might be a slow month or a busy month, but as long as I have 4 or 5 different outlets, 4 or 5 different hats I can wear, then I can juggle those different roles and personas and then keep things stable financially. And then over the years, I've gotten more into crypto. And so it's been using that to kind of stabilize my career as a musician, because I don't believe in the fiat central bank system. So it's like, you find different ways of it's balancing, juggling, walking the tightrope of a number of different careers within one.
Multiple sources of income.
Yeah, it's key.
Yes.
Diversification is what that is.
Well, that too.
Don't keep all your eggs in one basket.
Well, that too.
All you guys nailed it. All different versions of the same concept. I like it. You guys are a good team, a good trio over here.
So I got into crypto because of Rob. I'm not gonna kid you. Yeah, because he posted.
Oh yeah, baby, I like it.
Yeah, because you posted something on Facebook about it. Well, you post a lot on Facebook about it. But then I said something like, how does one get started in this? And then you sent a link to Coinbase with your reference number or whatever. So I'm like, what the hell? I'm going to do this. So I went on Coinbase, opened an account, used your reference number, and I'm just putting like $50 a week in it, whatever, But
that's good DCA, baby.
I know it's something that you're super passionate about and really, gotten interested in. I mean, let's talk about it a little bit. And you, honestly, Connor and Jake, you guys are probably a little more smarter than I am about this topic. So I'll be interested to hear this conversation.
Jake is probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I stand by it. I think it's, when you compare it to what's going on, especially right now, it's been around for a few years, but now I think it's more prominent than ever when you look at our currency and the Fed printing more money and inflation. And when you look at a decentralized currency that's at itself, right? And there's no more of it. There's no less of it. I think it's something that can really take off, and people obviously are seeing value in that. And that's why we're seeing some more consumer sentiment and the value going up, because really it's not backed against anything other than what the next person is willing to pay for your token. So I think that's what's interesting about crypto and what's interesting about NFTs too, to where it's really, they're almost the same, to where they're on this blockchain technology. And that's the only thing that's really proving that what you own is what you own. And people are buying into that. They see the security into it and they can trust that. And that's kind of where the value is stemming from. So it's something I subscribe to. And I think that it's something that we're going to see not only in currencies and artwork. We talked about before in the podcast about recording property on blockchain. And it's really just a technology as much as in a society that we live in right now, where there's a lot of fraud and a lot of things can be edited or misconstrued. Having this piece of technology to where something that can be recorded on there and it's decentralized and one person is in control of it. I think it's a really powerful thing for the direction of what we're headed in society.
Yeah, so I agree with Jake on that, and like Rob talked about like decentralized and fiat currency and things of that nature, and so a lot of Jake and I have a mutual friend, and he's really big into cryptocurrency and those type of things and NFTs, and he really taught me a lot about NFTs. But occasionally I was called a suit in a sense because
any sort of pushback.
Yeah. Because I always think about it as like these governments are so big, and like I agree with crypto. Like I think that crypto will be the future or can be the future of currency in a lot of things, but there's a lot of governments that are involved with this, and so I think when governments get involved, there's going to be a huge pushback from a governance standpoint. So I'm curious to see how that like fluctuates with the volatility and stuff. And like I'm more of a technical trader on like regular stocks and those type of things and like equities. But no, I'm really curious to see what Rob thinks too about crypto, and then I kind of chime in since I'm a occasional suit, but also a big believer in it too.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty in line with what Jake described. I think that idea of a decentralized finance, because for centuries we've been dealing with banks that are able to print money. I mean, our own Federal Reserve, it's printing money, and we don't really have control over that. And ultimately we're paying debt onto that. So if you have a financial system where it's, in terms of Bitcoin, it's finite, like there's only so many Bitcoin, and then it gets halved. So it's incentivized that it's a deflationary asset. So over time, it's only going to grow in value. And then people buy into that. And it's also done in this decentralized way through the ledger system. So it's backed by essentially like an equation of verification or an equation of authenticity. It could be, at least it's a component, right? Because I also love the idea of silver, gold, real estate as like physical assets, but as a digital asset that could be this. And Bitcoin is just one component, because you have Ethereum, you have Terra Luna, you have all these different other coins that are attempting to do different aspects of this ecosystem of finance. It could be, and it already is in some people's view, the digital answer to finance for this globe. And if it continues to grow in value, unlike the dollar, which just continues to depreciate, and that's why we're seeing inflation, all this stuff. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that kind of circumvents that whole central banking system of control of like the ownership of the wealth in a few hands, and us having to deal with debt and inflation and depreciation of money, of fiat.
Yeah, inflation's huge too. I mean, to your point, Rob, it's I can't believe that people couldn't forecast that inflation wasn't going to go up when you print out trillions of dollars and hand them out for free, and we're going to be paying for it for a long time, and so I see it in that sense, and it's a true hedge. Cryptocurrency is to the dollar, and we've seen it from a technical side too. Is you look at it, and gold used to be the hedge of inflation, and now I think crypto is going to be. It's not proven yet because time hasn't elapsed in a high inflation market, but you see it climbing up still. It's just, I think, to the suits of the world, to the establishment of people, it's very volatile, and so they're scared. But I've had this concept for the last 5 years of my life, and thinking through is like, I look at my grandmother and I talk to her about stuff, and she won't invest in anything except CDs. Okay, she's 93 years old,
Right.
But she'll only invest in CDs because alternative investments were bonds back in the day.
Yep.
And
Right.
turned into stocks as alternative investments, and REITs became alternative investments. And
Yep.
so this guy, Hassim Talib, writes this great book about Fooled by Randomness. It's a alternative investment book. And so I think that the next step of alternative investments could be crypto, or is crypto. And I think
What
it's
about a mortgage-backed security?
Well, those are just crap.
Yeah.
Just CDOs and
Yeah.
they're I mean, we're looking at it. I mean, the corporate debt right now and the corporate mortgage-backed securities on corporate offices and things of that nature are gonna not be well. But mortgage-backed securities, I mean, I'm not a fan of it. And I sat on one of the largest mortgage-backed security desks for a summer internship, and I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've all seen The Big Short.
Yeah.
We know what can happen.
Right.
Exactly. Great movie.
Exactly. Great movie. Saw it again recently. Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the macro, because Bitcoin now it's a good over 10 years. Yes, on the micro, you'll see a volatility of a drop of 50%, 80%. And then of course spikes of 2, 3, 4, 5x in short periods. But over the long term, I was listening to a podcast today. I believe it's about 200% on average a year growth in Bitcoin, where you look at the depreciation of fiat dollar and your buying power just decreases. I mean, it's 20, 30%, depending on inflation, sometimes even more. So if you compare like the last 10 years, if you would put the same amount of money into Bitcoin versus kept it in a bank and savings, I mean, the difference is astronomical. It's massive. It's huge. So I think I would say it has proven itself, but I wouldn't say that doesn't mean it's not volatile. It is, but over the long term, if you hold, then you're going to look at considerable profit. It's just about, what angle you want to take on it. What perspective and lens do you want to look at it through? Are you looking at it a 5-year, 10-year kind of investment? Or are you looking at a 1 year where, you could buy at the top and lose 50, 80% of your money? But if you sit so I got in at a really stupid time in 2017 when Bitcoin was at the top. So the top was around $18,000-$19,000. And I was just like, people were saying it's going to go to like 50 or 100K that cycle. So I bought in and I'm like super excited. And then I just watched my investment go down. I mean, at one point, Bitcoin was I bought at 19, it was at $3,000. But I was like, when it was around 6, I was like, look, what am I going to do now? Do I sell and just like waste my money, or do I double down, buy in when it's at a low, and just because it's bound to at least get back to where I bought it? I was thinking like, look, if it can just break even at some point, I'll be fine and I'll actually make money because I'll buy at a low. And fortunately it did, but it's that mindset of like, now that $19,000 investment, or I didn't buy a full Bitcoin at the time, but is now like people would be dying to buy Bitcoin for that price. But at the time I was kicking myself and hating myself. But if you wait just long enough, and a lot of people sold because they were afraid, but you wait long enough and all of a sudden it becomes a good investment. And that was the worst time to buy, and it still became a good investment.
I think it's an interesting phenomenon that we see. And I think around that time, like that was the first time that we had labeled one of these periods of time a crypto winter. So I think it's really interesting how, because of it's so volatile like that, and people talk about so much about the panic or the hold or FOMO. There's so many things labels that people put on these. I honestly just believe in holding it, right? Like you could day trade something like this just because there's so much volatility to it. But if you buy a little bit every month and you're just holding on to it, I do see the value in it. If you understand the blockchain technology, I think more than anything, I think it's important that when people are buying this, they're looking at it as an investment into blockchain technology and bringing the blockchain to the forefront. And as it becomes more popular, we can find out other places where we can use this in society and not just looking for a quick buck. I think a lot of people, especially that are using Coinbase, and they see these in the news, and the only time it's ever in the news is when it's just on an absolute tear, is people just coming in and I'll put some money in here and try to cash it out in like a couple of weeks and make a quick buck. So I wish there was more people. And I think that's really what it started on, right? Like all the nerds that got in on this at the very beginning, this is like the .com all over again, right? The nerds are taking over. They're the rich ones now. But in those guys, if you talk to them, and I know some of them, it's like they're not concerned. They don't talk about this in relation to the any fiat currency. Like when we talk about Bitcoin, we often talk about and we compare it and say in terms of US dollar, right? these people are really talking
I'm
to it
thinking about
about a fractions of tokens. They don't look at it as any conversion back to the US dollar. They are truly investing into this network and the system of decentralized currency, and these different networks, whether it be Ethereum or Bitcoin or some of the other ones that Rob listed. So I think there's two groups of people that really believe into it as currency, and people that are kind of just in it to make a quick buck. The people that are in it to make a quick buck they'll panic when things like that happen. They don't double down. They don't see that it has these long-term potentials. So you just kind of have to be careful when you're looking at that. And where you lose money is when you try to time the market, and especially something this volatile, and when you panic. You can't try to time it. You got to buy it. Stay on it. Buy it every month, no matter if it's $60,000 or if it's $3,000.
Just keep sinking money into it. Yeah, and you guys have all mentioned the whole, the volatility factor of it, and the swings are huge.
Yeah,
they're huge.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
percent today.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's like
you have to be able to.
You got to be in it for long.
Yeah, and I think an interesting way, if you are one of those people who are looking at it as not from supporting the network and the technology behind it, and looking at it from a dollar perspective, is that as long as you're not over leveraging yourself, the floor is relatively low. The ceiling, from what we've seen, is super, super high. I know people that were trading Bitcoin at $100, $150 a coin. The ceiling is there. So as long as you're not over leveraging yourself and you're only putting in what's responsible, there's a potential. You just have to hold.
Yeah. To both of your points too, it's like, fundamentals of investing don't change because it's cryptocurrency, it's real estate, it's a CD, whatever it is. It's like time. It's not timing the market. Like you said, it's time in the market. And Rob pointed, it's like over the course of time, it's going to be great. I mean, to Rob's point, I invested in crypto in 2017. And, I sat there and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Panic. And luckily I held because, to your point, I didn't over leverage myself. So I said, hey, let's write it out. Let's see what happens. And, luckily it's been a benefit to me, but in a sense of timing it, it's tough. I mean, it's volatile. It's like buying shorts, or buying puts and selling puts in the market. It's just, that's a timing aspect. And like you either get really lucky because
and that's very short term. Yeah.
Very short term. And like I've lost more money selling or buying puts than I have, buying crypto. And I'm a big fundamental or I'm a big technical trader in that sense. So I get it. And I'm occasionally, but I understand from your guys' perspective, like why it makes sense.
Yeah. And just to talk about that 2017 timeframe again, I thought that was a really interesting part of Bitcoin, because that's like the first time those like that October, November timeframe of 2017 was the first time that was really hitting the news. That's like when people like your parents are starting to ask about it. What is this? What is this? And I feel like everyone was buying it. That's when Coinbase was really starting to take off. And then right after that is when we entered that like crypto winter zone. So it kind of shook out a lot of the people who maybe were just kind of in this because it was the hot new thing. But yeah, I was working at a financial institution during that time, and we were sending wires out to different exchanges, and people were spending tons and tons of money. People were coming in and just saying that they've heard about this, or they had a buddy tell them. Really, the only way people were getting into it is you were reading it in the news, or someone was telling you that they made a bunch of money on it, and you were kind of just following them blindly without really understanding what kind of technology was there and what exactly you were buying.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you guys are so smart.
God, not smart at all. I'm an idiot.
I just read about stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But Jake, you're absolutely right. I think the people that stayed in were the ones that investigated what this was actually all about and believed in the ethos. They believed like, oh, this could replace this broken financial system. And there was actually like a real equation and basis to this creation. It wasn't just this sort of like, people think of it as some people still think of it as a Ponzi, but like when you investigate it, there's actually some real, core ideals to the whole system. And I think people that believed in it just stuck around and were like, let's see where this goes. I believe in the idea. I believe in what it's aiming to do. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think more and more people, and then over time, it proves itself in that. And over time, I think the stability tends to be less extreme because more people are invested, more people are holding, less people are sort of buying and selling. You'll still always have the whales that are manipulating the market, but the more people are invested and hold, the less that can shift. And we're starting to see that. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but the more mainstream adoption happens, in 5-10 years, you probably won't see Bitcoin make these giant moves. It'll be 10-20% moves, not 50-80% moves.
They'll stabilize then is what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
That's what markets do over time.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, as they do. Yeah, which we know.
So, I mean, I go down these rabbit holes on YouTube all the time, whether it be on crypto or whatever. So my latest rabbit hole is this whole metaverse thing. Are you guys familiar with this?
Yeah, definitely.
So is this metaverse idea tied into the blockchain and crypto and all this? I mean, I hear people like buying real estate in the metaverse.
Yeah, a lot of corporations.
Fucking insane.
That's what hit the news this week, like Sony and then all the Apple, all these different corporations buying these plots of land. It's interesting for sure. I mean, it all turns back to, I think, when people ask me about it, and I just watched this movie this past weekend too. Again,
what was it?
Ready Player One is like,
Ready Player One.
Right.
Exactly.
Really the best way to, and that was a book that was written, I don't know what year that was, but 30, 40 years ago. It's just a VR set. And then we talk about NFTs and stuff, how people are buying these characters that are going to be their characters, their avatars,
in the metaverse.
Their person and their metaverse. Yeah. I think that the craziest way to look at this is Zuckerberg and how much money he's put into this for the past decade, and how much of the Facebook like workforce has been like almost secretly working on this behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of Facebook, you think of the social media, but really behind the scenes, they've been building this universe and seeing how they can bring it to reality. And I just think with Zuckerberg, the name change and stuff with the parent company of Facebook, it just makes you feel like something's ready almost, or he's getting close at least to bringing this to application.
How about you, Rob? What do you know about it?
Yeah, well, similar to what Jake said, I mean, there's a lot of theories tied to it. So it's definitely a big part of a growing side to crypto. So you have coins like Decentraland and Sandbox, where they're metaverse tokens. So there's an element of gaming to some of them, where you're in the metaverse and it's a game. And so you can buy, it can kind of combine several aspects of the crypto world, where you could buy an NFT that is a component to the game where you can earn to play. So it's like, or play to earn, they call it. So you're playing the game and earning the crypto involved in that game within a metaverse kind of ecosystem. So it's all these different components. Now, what does that mean like on an existential level with like the future of humanity, right? Like, does that mean that in 10, 15 years, like kids are just going to be living in a metaverse and like not going outside and just like within this kind of like matrix world, and that's where all of their sort of financial assets are put into, and that's where their existence is, and that's how they're communicating with other human beings? I don't know. I mean, there's theories about that, and that kind of gets into the sci-fi aspect of it. Like, what will that mean? Or is it going to be just this thing? This is how we recreationally get entertainment. Like, it's no longer movies or music or this or that. It's like the movies and the music are part of this metaverse experience, and we go into the metaverse to be entertained. Maybe it'll be a little bit of both, but we're at the precipice of something strange and futuristic and sci-fi, and blockchain and crypto is definitely a component of it, Yeah,
I mean, it's so interesting to me. It's like you become callous to feelings. You know what I mean? When you start talking about this stuff and living in the metaverse and this and that, it's like the emotion goes out of it. It's just the strangest freaking thing.
What I think is interesting is what kind of conversations were people having, like how we were having this and with speculating 10, 15 years in the future. What is normal to us nowadays where people were speculating? You know what I'm saying? Like, like were there people in, the late 1800s sitting around having a conversation like this about a car, or like an iron pony that would like take them around. Right. Like, it couldn't happen. That couldn't happen. Like, well, what about a world where, you know what I'm saying? Or like even like a TV or something, or a VR headset, like these conversations have definitely happened. Like, I think that like the people that say like when their argument against the metaverse, like, oh, that could never happen. It's too complex, or it's just happening. Like imaginary. Yeah. It's crazier things could happen, but we just become numb to them because innovation happens. Right. Does that make sense?
Right. No, that's a really great point. And when you were talking about it, it made me think of also just the internet and social media. Like 20, 30 years ago, would we expect to be connecting with people across the world and like sharing videos and photographs and all of this content and interacting and commenting on it? Like, that would have been a wild concept in the 80s or 70s.
Sure. I mean, if you think about it, social media itself and how you can interact, or even playing Xbox or PlayStation with someone at its level, shows signs of a basic fundamental of what the metaverse is. Getting into a chat room with someone and communicating with someone in a virtual way, you're leaving the communicating in the real world and communicating in the digital world. It's the foundation of what the metaverse is built on.
Or try to explain to like somebody TikTok, like that's a very relevant thing right now in society.
Oh yeah.
I mean, but we look at it too, like
Kodak was refused to innovate. And so they thought that they were going to have disposable cameras for the rest of their life and didn't move into the digital space. And now I just saw a iPhone commercial that has like, you can shoot a film basically on it. And do like, blur a person in the background and have a focus on one character and then blur the other character, like the main character, and have the focus on the secondary character.
Yep.
Like, I don't think Kodak could have ever seen that coming, or like Blockbuster and Hollywood videos. Like those things were like, I remember as a kid, like those were the greatest places to go. And now they're not existing. Actually, there's one Blockbuster still in like Bend, Oregon, I think.
I've been there. Yeah. It's on my Instagram.
visit it.
Yeah, I bought a couple of movies just because you have to, and some red vines.
Awesome.
But you have to, but like companies have to innovate. Like it's crazy. Like we talk about,
you have no choice anymore. You have no choice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You either innovate or you fall behind.
But I think we're in like a technology revolution, and I don't know if that's an actual coined phrase right now in our society. But like, we had the industrial revolution, but I feel like we're just compounding growth every year compared to like the industrial revolution, where it took maybe 20, 30, 40, whatever, how many years.
That's Brown's law. Yeah,
we are compounding growth here, and so I'm interested to see where we go. I mean, we talk about it every day at the office, but I mean, it's curious.
Yeah. It's a great conversation. I'd be interested to, because you guys are probably a little bit younger than I am. What do you guys feel about that future kind of moving forward? Like, is it daunting? Does it feel like this sci-fi world that's kind of entering the reality, or are you excited about it, or a little bit of both?
So I'm a different breed. I'm like an old, an old soul.
Like an old soul.
I'm an old soul, so I have a hard time with like.
I mean, you are in the stock market. I'm kidding.
I'm ancient because I'm in the suit.
I'm kidding.
Damn suit. It's I can never get rid of that term anymore. No. It's a little daunting, to be honest with you. Like talking about the metaverse and those type of things. Being able to adapt, because I'm so focused on like my career path. Like what are my steps? Like where do I want to go in my life? And then, I've always thought about it though, like seeing other individuals not be able to adapt to technology. I look at it as a hindrance to a lot of people. So I get on board though. So it is daunting, but at the same time, I'm like, I got to get on board or I'm going to get left behind. And if I don't get on board now, like I'm screwed. But I feel like Jake has a difference of opinions on that. I think he's excited.
No, yeah. I mean, it's cool. I think there's definitely ramifications. Like when you tell anyone, okay, like everyone's going to be living in a VR headset, and like what Rob said, like kids are going to be like coming home from school and putting on their VR headset. Like I think anyone can be honest about like what kind of ramifications like would come from that as like a society and being able to talk to each other. But I think that we're closer to that than what people realize right now. I mean, we're talking to Rob right now on Zoom. Like how far away really is that? People talk about like getting chipped and things like that and how crazy that would be. We carry our phones around with us. We strap technology to our wrists that measure all of our health data that go out to these corporations. I don't think we're that far. Like, I don't think it's that big of a jump to make us say that we're going to put on a VR headset and act in this movie. People play video games all day. People put on VR headsets to watch basketball games and NBA will sell you a courtside video camera. Like when you put all of these things together, we're not that disconnected from what I guess Zuckerberg and the rest of the Meta team are proposing.
I think COVID has helped too with that type of thing.
Well, has helped advance it.
Advance it. Yeah. I think COVID has helped advance like the technology side of it. And the craziest thing is I'm a big Duke fan, so maybe this is why it stuck out to me so much. But like I watched Coach K have an interview with Grant Hill during like the COVID quarantine time, and they had a virtual like projection of Coach K sitting in a
hologram.
A hologram. AT&T does it now, and so I'm like sitting there going, holy cow, this is where we're going. Like FaceTime is a anymore. Like I'm gonna have a hologram of Rob sitting on the other side of the table now doing a podcast instead of on Zoom, in a couple of years. It feels like
I don't disagree with any of what you guys are saying, but how are you ever going to replace human touch?
I think that's where you gotta. I think that's where the success of people. That's where I'm trying to find is like you. I think our generation is going to be very successful in having the human touch and being able to communicate with other generations, but then also be able to advance in technology, similar to you. Like you have technology, you're able to communicate with technology and do those things, and you can talk to Jake and I and relate to us, but then you can also relate to your peers. And so I think that's where we have to sit. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, think generationally too. Like we know how to work technology, right? So like, and older generations, they don't have the best time understanding how to use Zoom or computer, just even things like that basic, right? That we look to as just like normal things. Like what if we're that generation in a few generations to where we don't know how to work our meta suit, or we don't know how to log on to or we're not in the right meta world, or we're not buying the right meta world. So like, I really do think that that'll be the case of where we're going to lose, like what you said, if you don't get on board, then you get left behind.
Left behind in a really bad way.
Yeah. I mean, think about the grandparent, you know, or the family friend that you know that doesn't know how to use a computer. They're not on social media. Yeah. You can say that they've been left behind in a big way, right? Not being able to see other people or what their family or friends and stuff are doing. Is that like a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but they have been left behind in a way by not adapting and learning this new technology that has been adopted by society as a whole.
Rob, what are your thoughts on this? I'm curious now, like hearing us talk about it. Like,
I'm it's great to listen and hear the different perspectives. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like there's a little bit of this bifurcation where you have people who are gravitating towards like, whether it be like plant medicines and indigenous cultures and farming and sustainability in their own kind of ecosystem of like growing their own plants, and this kind of desire and almost craving to be like nature. Like, I've been so removed from nature, please like bring me back to it. I want to be outside, I want to be in the wild, I want to move out of the city and get a plot of land and like create a farm or a ranch, or this kind of live off the grid. So there's definitely a movement of that. It may not be the majority, but there's definitely like a resurgence of that. And then you have this like technology expansion. Now there might be a way to bridge those two and have the like a coexistence, but I see this very interesting sort of divide, and you almost wonder if in 30-40 years you'll have these like people living outside of the city and their reality and existence is completely different than these people living in the city that are like within the metaverse, within this AI technology. And you'll almost like go out to the farm and it'll be like Amish, like a version of like today's New York City's types going to an Amish farmland or something, like, but it'll be the new generation of that. So I wonder what's going to happen just as humanity in terms of like this division and how much of us are going to go one way or the other. And is there a way to like somehow be a hybrid version of this? I don't know. So I just think about what's going to evolve out of this, but I'm here for the ride. So it's interesting to hear what you guys say.
I think that's a really interesting point, because the metaverse or not, at some point you have to log off, right? So what happens?
Yeah, what happens when you log off?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So like,
who are you then?
You can always just,
right.
You could just take it back to Ready Player One, right, where they kind of bridge that, where he takes it off and the world is kind of like an almost like Wall-E type world where everyone's just like a junk world where people are not interested in developing and innovating in the real world. They're only interested in innovating in the meta world. So it kind of loses that, the real life loses any sort of like development. I could see that being the case. And I like the comparison of like the Amish to like city folks now too. I think that would be something. You have the adopters and the non-adopters, and how that separates them in the future.
Yeah, but you can also be an adopter and live off the grid.
And still be a part of it.
Yeah. It's beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Right. I love that idea of like, maybe you have a ranch and you're growing your own food, but like you still can finance that with Bitcoin or finance that through technology or even the metaverse on some level. But yeah, how that will, actually come into a reality, I guess we're still navigating that, still seeing where it goes.
I think that's interesting too. That kind of made me think about like, what if you like lived out in like the country and like on like a ranch or something, and away from everything else, but you still have an internet connection and you work like when you had talked about earlier, like this the earn to play type of, where you're working 8 hours a day in this metaverse. And then after these 8 hour days, you log off and you're at your ranch. How much different is that than what we're doing working from home right now, right? Where you're logging into this different area, this work for metaverse, working for 8 hours a day and then logging off and living your normal life, right? You could draw that
and then
as it stands right now.
Right. And then I guess the difference would be that if you have this sort of sustainable place, you create your own sustenance, and then you're not reliant on like, oh, how am I going to get food? You're creating it. The income may come from modern technology, but you've created your own sort of reliance. So like, if a catastrophe happens in a city and you can't go to the grocery store, this kind of thing, it's like, then how is one going to eat? But if you're in this situation where you're on your own plot of land, you've grown your own food, there is some kind of dependability to that, even if you might be somewhat tied to the metaverse. So there's these different variables. And I guess everyone is going to kind of decide like, what kind of an existence do I want to live within or as a part of, and how much reliance do I want to have on myself versus a system?
I guess the question I have is like, how do you stay ahead of the curve?
That's a great question.
How do you stay ahead of the curve? I mean, it's so hard to keep up with technology as it is.
I think it comes down to oh wait, Rob, go ahead. I want to hear what Rob says actually.
Well, I was just going to say like, which curve? I feel like there's so many kind of curves. There's like a mainstream curve, but then there are all these like, it's like the music world we can kind of compare it to. There's like mainstream music, but then there's all these underground curves. Like you were saying earlier, Kent, how you want to be on top of like what's coming up next. Yeah. Well, that's a whole different kind of curve than the top 40 curve. So I feel like, which curve does one want to ride or explore? I guess that's what came to mind.
Well, interesting.
When I look at like curves, and when you talk about that, and I think Rob, put that question in perspective for me, is like, I follow money. Like where's money going? So like one of the largest country artists right now is investing in sustainable farming. And I happened to talk to the banker about it, a couple of weeks ago. I know the investment banker on it. And so like they're investing in sustainable farming outside of Nashville. And, they've got a lot of money. And so I follow that. Or like you look at what Nancy Pelosi invests in, not getting political, but like you can look at these political figures and see where their money is going to see where
follow the money.
Yeah, follow the money. And that's what I look at. It's like where are they investing in? She bought, I think, like calls of Facebook, calls of Apple, and all these things. So like I look at that, but I think it comes down to fundamental of like what captivity has brought people, and like how do you get out of captivity? And it's knowledge and education. So like knowledge is power. And so like I just read a lot. That's how I try to stay out of the curve. But there's things where I'm not as
you can't invest in everything. There's so many different ways to do it. And really quick, just a point to validate what you were just saying before, when you say follow the money and see what these big powerful entities are doing, look at the institutions, right? And just to talk about Bitcoin, to bring it back, is how is that validating Bitcoin, right? You talk about institutions, how they're buying these Bitcoins, right? These banks are looking and researching these blockchain technology now, right? If we're talking about following what the big dogs are doing, whether it be Facebook or Nancy Pelosi or any of these investment banks, they're buying Bitcoin. Institutions have a footprint within these decentralized currencies now. So if that doesn't validate that these companies are smart, they're powerful, they understand what's going on and where everything is headed, right? So if they're doing that, then right, there's something there.
Yeah,
absolutely. And for a long time, a lot of those institutions were trying to almost suppress or put Bitcoin down. So if anything, the fact that they're now getting in is proof that they see it's inevitable. So there's this inevitable growth, and they're like, well, if we're not going to we have to be a part of it, because if we're not, we're going to miss out. And then whoever is a part of it is going to have control or have the sustainability or have the wealth and they want that, I mean, sometimes it's driven by greed, but it's also driven by opportunity.
Then to bring back Connor's moment right now for these banks, when you talk about decentralized currency, this is their Kodak moment, right? Are they going to adapt and ditch film and go digital, or are they going to stay with the film and fizzle out and let the players who do switch to digital take over?
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they invest a lot of time and a lot of energy. I sat on one of the largest money managers in the world, like fund to fund desk, and like they spent a lot of time trying to find like innovative hedge funds and how, like, what is the next best investment vehicle. And so like we were talking about cryptocurrency in 2017, 2018 kind of thing. And so like those are things that like they're very aware of. And so like they've got a lot of money moving towards that direction. And so like I want to put my money towards what they're putting their money towards, because they as much as we want to knock on suits, like they have a lot of influence in our society, and like
and they have insight and they know where the ball is going.
Yes, sure. and to Rob's point, it's like they were trying to play it down, like different types of institutions were trying to play it down because it's going to hurt their bottom line. Probably it's going to hurt their bottom line, but at the same time, they go, well, you know, if it hurts our bottom line a little bit, it's better than hurting our bottom line completely. Like I would rather I would rather not have that Kodak moment. I'd rather get on board. You know, society's
exactly. And they're smart enough to have the analysis where they can see into the future, and they're going, we better get on this train before it runs us over in some capacity, you know, like you said. Yeah.
By the way, Kodak better sponsor this.
Yeah,
I mean, they're upstate New York.
Shameless plug.
I mean, my whole family, the O'Gorman side of the family is going to love it because they all have pensions from Rochester at Kodak. Because that was
Kodak's going to open up 10 points tomorrow.
Hey, you know what? That was a great conversation. I love it. Can we move on?
Yes. Let's
do it. I got something else I've got to talk to Rob about that I am so interested in. It's driving me insane. So, Rob, you have experienced ayahuasca, right?
Yes, in the yahe form, which is apparently is a stronger form, but it's a form of ayahuasca. Yeah.
Okay. I am so curious about this. You can talk all you want about it, but tell me how this came about and what the experience was like.
So through COVID, you know, as we all experienced some pretty wild existential experiences, and my partner in the band and wife and I split and had this kind of wild clashing of ideologies and all of this kind of stuff. And the idea was to you know, maintain a sense of love and care and desire for her to kind of move on in a loving way. But it was a real struggle. It was a real challenge. I mean, this is someone I spent so many years with and had such intimacy with and all of it. So that was an existential crisis on top of one. And my friend Pilar, who lives in Ojai on the property with my mom, was talking about going to Colombia to this place called Finca Ambawasi, which is like a farm in the mountains outside of Colombia. And it's run by this guy, or the kind of the focal Taita is Taita Juanito. And there's a great documentary that features him called The Medicine. And they call it The Medicine, ayahuasca. They think of it as a healing practice, not like it can be explorative, but it's the core of it is a medicine. It's a healing. So she was talking about going on this trip, and I thought I'd been wanting to do this. I read this book by Graham Hancock called Supernatural, where he went into these explorations down in South America as well. I think he went to Peru, but he explored ayahuasca, and it changed his whole perspective on life, existence, the whole, you know, ran the gamut of kind of human consciousness and what he was exploring, wrote a whole book about it, influenced me. This felt like this is the opportunity. You know, it had been a decade of like, should I try and seek this out? And then it almost comes to you at a time, and it presented itself. So we went down there, traveled to Colombia, which was a wild time. When I arrived, there were like riots going on, helicopters happening, all part of sort of the, you know, response partly to COVID, but what was happening with the government in Colombia. And then we get trekked up into these mountains and spend 10 days, basically most of the time, on these, you know, traditional natural medicines to heal and explore and, yeah, go on these journeys. So that's that paints the picture of how it happened and why it happened. In terms of the actual experience, I mean, it can run. So I mean, I had heavy internal experiences to do with kind of myself. Like you're looking into a mirror and it's like, these are the things that you should be recognizing about yourself to overcome. Things where I was in like a psychedelic Satan circus of Las Vegas, like slot machines, like this dancing, like horror. It was almost like the worst of modern technology embodied in this dancing circus that was just like penetrating my mind, almost like electricity, just like shocking your core and existence. And then beautiful things, like from like very kind of sensual sexual things. My father, who had died 3 years ago, I had a moment like connecting with him, embracing him, and like overcoming, the kind of clashes and conflicts between us, and like embraced him. I mean, to things that were like off planet, like genetic DNA, that where humanity has like heritage that comes from the stars. There was like elements of that. So I mean, it was a massive journey of 6 days of basically being in another realm, in another state. Just wild. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much more I could go into, but that gives you kind of like the Cliff Notes version of this psychonaut journey into ayahuasca. But it's all, ultimately it's healing, and it's about also purging. So there's a lot of like shitting your brains out, barfing your brains out with other people. So you're like next to people, just like hurling into buckets. The first night, it's pretty funny. So we take the medicine, and I'm like waiting there, sitting, like, of course, people next to me just sort of like within 30, 45 minutes, just barfing their brains out. You just see these like buckets full of like sludgy liquid, and the whole room, there's like 60, 70 of us. So it's just like a symphony of barfing. And then people are like calling for help. So it became this kind of like, and I'm watching this going like, why am I not experiencing this? Like, what's going on? Like, what? But then the ego sets in, right? And you're like, oh, like I'm good. I'm like above, I'm above it. I'm like, I'm good with the medicine. The medicine likes me, blah, blah, blah. So like it kind of quiets down after like 3 hours of just like mania, barfing, screaming mania, like just like an insane asylum. And I lay down, like close my eyes. I'm like drifting off to sleep. I'm like, I got this. I'm good. Brilliant. Lay back on my little like mat. The moment I close my eyes, fall asleep, my mouth opens and out shoots a fountain of vomit, spraying like both the guys next to me, like shooting 3-4 feet in the air. I look up and it's just like projectile. I've never like squirted vomit like this in my life. And it like shoots over onto my chest. I basically leap like in the arc of the vomit into the bucket. And then I'm just like, now I'm the one barfing my brains out and everyone else is quiet. So it's like spotlight on this guy who like thought he could circumvent the vomit episode. So yeah. And then it was just like, oh, now everyone in the whole room gets to hear me like retch and just like let it all out. But in the end, it's good. You release.
High school high.
It was a little embarrassing.
This is a 6-day ordeal, right?
Sorry.
You said this was like a 6-day ordeal.
Yeah, 4 nights of the medicine, but even the days in between, it's not like you're like, oh, I'm back to normal, because you're not really sleeping through the night too. So you have, you're on it for essentially like 6, 8, 10 hours. And then there's dancing and all these elements to it, and healing. They like hit you with these nettle brushes. So you're like body's stinging. I mean, it's a wild experience. Like you get these like healings from the shaman, from the taitas, which is a beautiful experience, but it's a whole episode. It's a whole wild
Orchestrated, like,
sorry.
how does something like this like get orchestrated? Like, is there like a website, or like how?
Yeah, how did you get to go on this journey?
How can we join this?
Good. All right, bringing more people on. I love it.
Rob,
For this particular place, there is a website called Finca Ambawasi. I think it's fincaambawasi.com, or if you just FINCAAMBIWASA, and the kind of the head Taita is Taita Juanito, who's actually one of the youngest Titus. He's like a very I call him like the rock star of the
So he's
of the ayahuasca world. He's just like got this wonderful presence. He's got a great sense of humor, and he exudes like kind of cool and also spirituality. He's found a good balance of like humor, coolness, spirituality, and just like he's just a wonderful warm soul. He just embodies that. But yeah, they have, I think it's 4 sessions a year, 4 or 5, and you go for the 10 days. It's not that expensive, and they feed you. It includes the ceremonies, includes the whole experience. You just pay for your flight down there, pay the fee. There are other ones too. There's other ones in Peru, that kind of thing. But yeah, you would sign up through the website. A lot of these have websites, and they've kind of integrated. It's the same, kind of goes with the theme we've been talking about. I mean, you couldn't have more of a traditional form of kind of medicine, but they're using modern technology. They even have like an Instagram. They're using social media to bridge that gap, because especially Taita Juanito is very aware of how important this medicine is. And if he can find a way to infuse it into the modern world and into this technological world, maybe the soul and spirit of that can find its way in to the metaverse or into the, this AI technological world we're stepping into. So it all comes back around to the theme of this whole conversation. But yeah, there's ways to just, you kind of book it through the website.
my mind is so fucked up right now. So like, do you get like referral credits, Rob, or something if you like use your code or something?
You definitely pay for this in Bitcoin.
No, I want to do it. I swear to God, I want to do this. I've been doing some research over the last year or so, and I want to fucking do it.
Have you heard of Paul Stamets at all?
No.
Oh, have you heard of Paul Stamets at all, Rob?
No, I'm not familiar.
All right, so I got a buddy that came into town, and
his name is Paul Stamets.
No. Paul Stamets is a really good podcast. So if you have a buddy
really?
Oh yeah, 4 years ago or something like that.
Oh, okay, I'll look him up.
I don't even know how to pronounce this word. Ken said it at the beginning, like I can't read at all. But it's like something mushroom of the world. Paul Stamets is all about the psychedelic, like, and I know it's different, but Paul Stamets is like the guy that talks about like mushrooms and things. And so my buddy's reading off like a paragraph or a chapter of this book about psychedelics, and before I was like, what is psychedelics? And then now hearing Rob and him in the last week talk about this, I'm like,
wow.
Like, what the heck's going on? Is this some divine intervention that I'm having right now?
Maybe you're being called. I mean, mushrooms is also I've had some very powerful mushroom experiences, and they do ceremonial, especially in Mexico. That's a big component. Yeah, different places offer different ways, and they're almost like different doors of exploration, right? Different, like, it's a different cocktail, I suppose, of entering this world, and it's so much of it is, if you do it, I would say the one thing that is so key is going into it with intent. So it's like, what is my intent? It may be, you may be like taking on a whole other ride that you didn't expect, but if you go in with the intent, right, whether it's physical healing, whether it's, something connected with your family or your childhood, or whatever it is that you're looking to explore, even just expanding your scope on life and reality, going into that and preparing that intent and really like honing in on it, that is going to make the experience a really fulfilling and beautiful thing.
So let me ask you this, Rob: is it something you do just once, or would you do it again?
That's a great question, and Taita talks about this as the integration. So at the end of that whole ceremony, we spent the 10 days there. He talked a lot about how, like, some people like to go right back in, right? They want to almost live on the medicine. It almost becomes, I don't want to call it an addiction, but like they're not ready to almost bring it into their real life. But the experiences you have on the medicine, it's so key to then go back, almost back home or back into your reality, however you want to describe it. And how do you integrate that other world you were in, those experiences you had, the things you saw, the things you felt, and then bring those two worlds together, which is again another theme of this whole podcast today, is like this sort of integration, this combination of these two different worlds or these two different versions of reality. So I would say it's up to you, but you really have to gauge it with your instinct. But it's very important to have that integration period to almost resolve the lessons you've learned and bring them into your life before the next journey. And for some people that might be years or even decades, and for some people it might be months or weeks. So it really varies. It's a person by person type basis.
So we're talking about alternative investments, and I don't want to get off track on this, but like microdosing, I've heard is like the next thing to invest in. Like it is medical marijuana of 10 years ago, or like recreational. Like, what are your thoughts then, Rob, on microdosing?
Psychedelic.
That's a brilliant segue. I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about investing, because I know that the psychedelic portion was a theme. That's a brilliant thing to bring up, because absolutely, you have a lot of, whether it be you have the medicinal marijuana world, but you also have the psychedelic world, microdosing mushrooms you have. And now that more of it's becoming legalized, and they can treat depression, they can treat anxiety, can treat all of these different things with these things, especially like you said, as a microdose, because sometimes if you go full throttle, for some people, that's a big experience. But if you can do it sometimes with smaller amounts, you can have these effects more gradually over time. And my sister's actually been going to school for this and learning to be a practitioner, and does ceremonies for psychedelic therapy essentially. And so I think that is talking about like what's cutting edge and what's the next kind of staying ahead of the curve. I think that is a massive part of what we're heading to into the future, in terms of that, also that combination of the technology of researching these drugs, but the fact that they're plant-based, they're ancient medicines that have grown from the earth, and how do we integrate that into the modern world and modern day? And I think as an investment, as just an experience, as a remedy, as an alternative to like pharmaceuticals. I mean, the beginning of this program, what do we start with? It was all about the opioid addiction and the opioid crisis. And we're coming full circle here, where this is a way to resolve those issues, and even an alternative to those addictions, or a way to remedy those addictions, or a way to overcome those addictions. So yeah, great point. And I think that's a big part of the future as well.
And I've heard it's or like there's research articles about how it's helped PTSD the most. Like people with PTSD, that microdosing is like the biggest thing. And like I know my brother struggled with PTSD and stuff of that nature. So I'm kind of curious on like, well, one, you talked about your sister going to school for this. Like, what type of school? Like what school does she go to?
So there's one called MAPS. It's short for, I mean, it's like an acronym for other words that I don't know at the moment. But I assume the word psychedelic is in there. I don't know, maybe I don't know. But MAPS is one school. There's several different types of school. It's still an emerging thing, and I don't think it's like most colleges won't offer, or even doctorate degrees won't necessarily offer this kind of education. So you have to go to specified schools, but I think you'll see it becoming more and more of a kind of a mainstream form of education, bit by bit, as it gets more adopted.
I know a guy that I met through curling, actually, of all things.
I just don't understand how you get involved with curling in
Sport
Arizona.
Of curling. I met an older gentleman. He's probably 78 years old right now. Unbelievable human being. And he goes to like these I don't want to say these camps, but these like microdosing experiences, I guess, and it's an ongoing thing for him. And he's just like a huge believer in this. And again, this guy's like 78 years old, but he's he's like the most interesting guy I've ever met in my life. And I have a connection with him at such an intimate level. It's crazy. So I love hearing about this stuff. And the ayahuasca thing, I mean, it's something that I have been looking at for over a year now. And I mean, I want to experience it. I just don't know where to start. That's where it boils down to.
Yeah, my told use the referral code Rob
Kolar.
Code word KOLARS. Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe the start would be even going to doing the microdosing or going into one of those areas first, unless you want to just dive into the deep end and go like full yahe, full ayahuasca. It's really what suits your personality and your, you know, your desire. But yeah, even just having one kind of session, I think is a good way to start, or one ceremony, whether it be with mushrooms or ayahuasca or some form of microdosing. It is a beautiful way to just get almost an introduction, and then you can kind of venture in depending on like what that experience was like for you.
I'm like 0% an expert in this, so
Yeah.
recommendations. I have no idea, but like to listen to my buddy talk about this over Christmas, like he was talking about the Paul Stamets and the psychedelics and the microdosing kind of thing. It's like he started this kind of path and he's never been so motivated in his life. I mean, he started to talk about, you know, potentially doing a business and all these things. He's probably the most intelligent human being I've ever been around. And so I'm like, gosh, there's got to be something to it. And
There
like
is
my capitalistic mind, of course, is always going like, there's got to be
How
some.
can I get in
Yeah,
on this?
how can I get on this too? But like, it's an interesting topic. I mean, but it's a society. I think it's going to shake society up, kind of like the medical marijuana industry. But like, I'm just curious.
No question. I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
you saw in the 60s how LSD and mushrooms and marijuana really changed culture and music and this kind of thing. And now it almost feels like there's a bit of a resurgence. It's always existed, but now it's become something that people are really embracing. And now in a way that's almost less recreational and more almost ceremonial. So now we're taking it to this other level of like putting all this intent into it. And like your friend having these ideas and almost like divine inspiration for a business and this kind of thing. I think you're seeing a lot of people be like, oh, discovering their path or discovering their calling or whatever you want to use for that through the medicine. It's almost like you shake off all of the grit and grime that's kind of like plastered onto you through the shitty ends of society, and you kind of scrape it off, and then you get to like, oh, what's actually really making me tick? What's really like driving my inspiration or my desires or my excitement? And you've shaked off like, you know, whether it was like, oh, I wanted to be famous, or I wanted to just be rich, or I wanted to have consume all these consumer products, or whatever it is that was kind of like clouding your vision. And it sometimes just sort of wipes some of that away and allows you to just see, to peek through into what really drives you deep down.
Well, I think you mentioned it like in your pre-show notes, the expansion of consciousness. I love that. Like a new awareness.
Yeah.
That goes so deep when you think about it.
Well, to both your points there too, is like, I think Rob hit it on, you know, the nail on the head. I can't even talk right now. It's like he said, what makes you tick? Like, I think the two most interesting questions, and one, my grandfather told me this one, is like, where are you from? Like, I love to find out where people are from, because they either hate where they're from or they love to tell you where they're from. So you can connect with them. And then my second one is like, what makes you tick? And so like, how do people find that out? And like, you know, it took me years of soul searching and like going through this process of like laboring over like what makes me tick, what makes Connor Gorman tick. But like, to Rob's point, it's like, you know, you can have these experiences as like, what, you know, brush the dust off real quick and find out what makes you tick. So to your point, it's like, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a way to kind of pull back the curtain. But again, it's an ongoing journey. So what makes you tick in one chapter of your life might take on a new form, and we might have different periods of these things. Like, I feel like when you were saying that, I was thinking like, what makes me tick? And having these kinds of conversations, we're exploring consciousness now from these 4 different angles, and we're doing it in this like great communal way. It's not conflict, and we're just building off of each other. And we're going to come away from this conversation with like, oh, like, yeah, that was really interesting with Jake's perspective on that. Or when Kent brought that up, or when Connor said that, it just was something maybe I couldn't have thought of, and vice versa. And so we're all in this kind of conversation together. And I think on this planet, we're in a very powerful and interesting time, partly because of COVID and all these drastic kind of things that have shaken up our world, that consciousness on a collective level, in a humanity collective level, is being shaken up and shifting and changing. And through these kind of dialogues where we're in all these different cities, through a podcast exploring this, we're venturing. This is a form of ayahuasca right now, the conversation, because we're exploring and pulling back things and just coming at it from different angles. So there's all these different ways to do it, and essentially we're doing it right now.
I'm about to throw up.
Please. Love it.
I'm like, holy fuck, I love Rob before the podcast.
I'm about to be the biggest fanboy of his music, dude, let me tell you.
Yeah, I know what I'm listening to on the way home.
Oh man, Rob, dude, hey, listen, man, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. This was a joy, true pleasure.
A long way from what's your favorite grilled cheese, sloppy joe, or peanut butter and jelly.
Dude, we went on a journey, baby.
We could talk another 3 hours.
Colombian journey.
So, Rob, I do have to ask you one question. A normal co-host isn't with us, but this is his favorite question of all time. We're going to be publishing a book here before too long. Do you have a mantra that you live by?
Can you spell that?
It says playing music up there. A little thing came on and just said playing music. The AI spoke. Play music is the mantra. Play music.
I love it, man. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you might want to get out there? Do we cover everything?
I feel like we ended on a beautiful note.
That was beautiful, man.
Musical note. Yeah, I think we covered some beautiful ground, and just want to thank you. I think the last thing would just be thank you guys for expanding my mind in this and being so cool and cordial and fun to talk to. It was a real pleasure.
Yep.
Highlight of my week.
We love you, man. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, love to.
All right. That'll do it.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers, man. That'll do it, boys and girls. Yet another amazing friend-making, value-adding show. Please be sure to check us out at thegeoholics.com. Follow us on all social media outlets by searching for The Geoholics. Believe it or not, there's a Geoholics app. Did you know that, Connor?
I did not know that.
You got to fucking download the Geoholics app from landsurveyorsunited.com.
I'm going to do it. That's my next shameless plug.
Send us an email at info@thegeoholics.com. Just say, hey, just let us know how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. Last but not least, please support our amazing friends of the program every chance you get, just like Mentoring Mondays. Be sure to mention that you're a Geoholic for the happy ending, as they say. Not really, but it sounds good. Pay it forward. Add value, make friends. Our new best friend, Rob Kolar, not alone. Available everywhere. Until next time, everyone. Conquer bad with good in 2022. And most importantly, be safe and healthy.
Once again, a shout out to our friends of the program, Aerotech Mapping Inc., atmlv.com, Advanced Geodetic Surveys Inc., agsgps.com, Bad Elf GPS, bad-elf.com, Cobb Fenley, cobbfenley.com, Cyanic Automation, getjobbook.com, Diamondback Land Surveying, diamondbacklandsurveying.com, Get Kids Into Survey, getkidsintosurvey.com, Land Surveyors United, landsurveyorsunited.com, Mentoring Mondays, mentoringmondays.xyz, Monson Engineering, monsonengineering.com, Nettleman Land Consulting, nlcprep.com, Parkland Community College, parkland.edu/surveying, Safety Apparel, safetyapparel.us, Tiger Supplies, tigersupplies.com, Trimble Geospatial, geospatial.trimble.com.